Well, everybody knows I've been having fun with this group because we have a fabulous group of men assembled here today, and I'd like to welcome you guys here and thank you for coming. I don't see Charles yet. Oh, there he is, right there, dead center. My bad, Charles. But anyway, again, I'd like to welcome you gentlemen here. And if you are ready, I'm ready to introduce Andy Komor, who is our first speaker, to bring us up to date as far as the water situation is concerned. Andy, go.
Welcome, Andy Komor with PACE. I am a professional water engineer, and I've been a water engineer for 20 years. It's my passion. Before that, I actually grew up just outside of Minneapolis. I worked for the park board for about 7 years at Gross Golf Course and Columbia Golf Course. I played on the U of M golf team. I played tournaments at Lake Hiawatha. And about 2 weeks ago, I saw in the Star and Tribune that there was a water problem at Lake Hiawatha. I heard the call to help, and I looked at the documents that Bar Engineering had done and sort of had identified a potential alternative solution where instead of sort of piling water on the site to solve water problems, we would do the opposite and try to dry the site. And so I prepared a few slides to present this concept alternative solution. And the solution's not just for Lake Hiawatha and the Hiawatha Golf Course, but it's for the lower Minnehaha Basin. And what I mean by that is there's a low point as water flows from west to east towards the Mississippi River. It happens to be around Lake Nokomis, Lake Hiawatha, and downstream of that at Minnehaha Falls. And this solution that we're about to show you provides more naturalization. So you'd have more opportunity for riparian habitat, biological diversity, improvement in water quality, trash, grit, and phosphorus and nutrients. Number two, most importantly, we would increase the amount of flood storage so that if there is a flood event, we'd actually be able to hold that water without flooding nearby property. Thirdly, we'd be able to recover land for maintaining the 18 holes that we have and potentially other uses. There's 206 acres of usable land on the Lake Hiawatha site. And fourthly, and most importantly, is that we would maintain permanent low groundwater conditions in the surrounding neighborhoods, which are otherwise subject to high groundwater tables and basement flooding. So this is a concept presentation, 10 slides. So summary of the basin's challenges. Lake Hiawatha was a man-made depression. It's about just over 25 acres of land, lake area. And it's kept high in order to drive water from Minnehaha Creek downstream over the falls and in the Mississippi River. A few years ago, it was at an elevation of 808. Now it's at elevation 811, and that's not high enough. It's actually got to go higher in order to get further downstream. Next to Lake Hiawatha's Lake Nokomis, that's also kept artificially high and causing some groundwater mounding because there's just not enough throughput past Lake Hiawatha. Pond E is a pond on Lake Hiawatha, or excuse me, Hiawatha Golf Course, and that maintains the groundwater conditions at about 805 or 806 below the lake, but it keeps everything kind of dry. Unfortunately, that pumps groundwater in a circle. So when that evacuates water, puts it on Lake Hiawatha, it drains right back down to itself, and it's inefficient because it's just pumping around in a circle. So as you see in bold, the problems are that these two lakes are kept unnaturally high. They leak and mound groundwater into the neighborhood basements, and they prevent dry, usable land for the park board. And finally, the flows coming down Minnehaha and the north stormwater flows, they're in need of better treatment and more littoral zones. Littoral zones are kind of wetland, riparian areas where water can be polished on its way out. So it's interesting to look back at the historic use of the site. Lake Hiawatha used to be named Rice Lake, and it was actually dry in the summer. In the summer, when there weren't a lot of rain events, the lake would sort of dry out, and it would become this area that was available for holding rainwater when rainwater did proceed down Minnehaha Creek. And so it was only, once it was dug out and the spoils used for the golf course, or is made into a permanently wet pool. Here's an aerial photo on the upper left of Lake Hiawatha. Minnehaha Creek sort of comes into Lake Hiawatha, has a quick stopover, and then makes its way downstream past 28th, through the falls and into the Mississippi River. And below that is from the BAR report, you can see Lake Hiawatha's elevation is about 811.5. And that water surface then proceeds out downstream. But unfortunately, there's restrictions on the way out. There's a restriction at 28th, a couple at 30th, and then one downstream past the falls, upstream of the falls. And these 4 restrictions mean that the lake is going to have to increase in level somehow in order to drive water out by gravity without having to pump it. Where is the groundwater coming from underneath Lake Hiawatha? Inside the BAR report, they showed a hydrogen and oxygen isotope analysis. And interestingly enough, monitoring wells 1 and 4, which are underneath the golf course, they have water that's representative of Minnehaha Creek. So Minnehaha Creek water is flowing down. It goes into Lake Hiawatha. It leaks down into the groundwater table, and it mounds the groundwater table in and around the golf course. Whereas if you go into the neighborhoods, monitoring wells 2 and 3, you'll see that that water is not representative of Minnehaha Creek. So a majority of the problems underneath the golf course, as far as high water, come from Minnehaha Creek stopping over in Lake Hiawatha. So the problem in my mind as a water engineer for 20 years with the master plan solutions, and I think there's a bunch of great data on what the problem is that the solution that's proposed is going to raise the raise the water table above Lake Hiawatha from 811.5 up to almost 813. And what that'll do is it'll actually pond water across a majority of the property, which was Hiawatha Golf Course. And because of that, instead of providing more flood storage for when it rains out, you'll actually have less area for water to go and pond up when there's a flood event. You'll have more groundwater ponding, and you'll have to drill wells in the surrounding neighborhoods in order to keep the groundwater low. And so as an alternative solution to doing that, we've developed this concept idea where we'll do the following. Here's an aerial map of Lake Hiawatha. Golf course is here to the west. Minnehaha Creek comes in here on the south. There's other storm flows that come in from the north on 43rd. We would channelize in a very natural serpentine, narrow, wide, natural flow path, both Minnehaha Creek and the north flows. We'd combine those two things together, and they would operate at the desired 813 elevation that would push all the water out by gravity downstream to the Mississippi River. And the areas that are the remainder of Lake Hiawatha, this here 25 acres of land area, those water surface elevations would be pulled down. So we would actually pull the existing pondee pumps and we'd move them closer to this waterway, and they would operate just like they do today, and they would maintain a low groundwater surface elevation. We would lower the water table in Lake Hiawatha and create a biodiverse wetland riparian areas right here. And anytime a flood event would come down these creeks, we would have an intentional overflow into this yellow area as shown here, and we'd be able to store the flood water in a purposeful, intentional way without flooding the surrounding property. So there's 3 key benefits. The bermed creeks, they push more water out by gravity, and which would also allow Lake Nokomis to drain down, and you could almost connect Lake Nokomis to these waterways. Number 2, the flood water, when it comes, it would overflow into a designated drier or lower detention basin that contains a bunch of wetlands. And number 3, we would keep the groundwater level low all the time without a leaking lake. And we would pump the water that's pumped not back into itself, but downstream. So when we create this additional 60 acre feet of volume where Lake Hiawatha is today, and that would be pulled down in water surface, that would create this intentional flood storage that would prevent flooding of the golf course in a 10-year storm event. So this figure here was shown from the BAR report right here. It shows basically ponding over the entire golf course in a 10-year storm event. That's an event that happens once every 10 years. And in our proposed solution, all of that water would end up where Lake Hiawatha was, and this golf course would stay high and dry. So to summarize, we think this water solution here, in concert with the design that Tom is going to talk about here shortly, and the other considerations for this historic site, we think we can get all of the desired beneficial uses of the property. This is pulled out of the EIR report, which shows that people are looking for inundated wetlands, gardens, canoe areas, meadows, all these other uses, wetlands. But in addition to that, instead of reducing it to a 9-hole golf course, we'd be able to retain the 18-hole golf course into the future. So with that, I'd like to conclude. I can answer questions at the end, and I'm going to turn it over to Tom Lehman to discuss the golf course.
All right, well, thank you, Andy. Really great information. I think I'd like to start by just saying that I am well aware and very appreciative of all the work that's gone into this process that gets us to where we are today. I mean, when I talk about that, I mean that there's the park board has put in an immense amount of work, created an immense amount of data, and data that's extremely well put together, very professionally done. And I guess we as a group would not be here today without having access to that very professionally done study by the BAR report. So understanding the water is everything, and so we're all beneficiaries of great information, and we're grateful for it. We happen to also be lovers of golf. The game has been important to all of us throughout our lives. Those of us who really care about the golf, and for good reason. I mean, everything that we have in our family's life is because of golf. We grew up very average means in Alexandria, Minnesota. But golf has been very good to us. It's taught us a lot of lessons in life. I know that the values and the work ethic and things like that my brothers and I have is because of the game of golf. So golf is important to us. It means a lot to us, as it does to many others. I realize that not everybody's a golfer, but then again, not everybody's a biker either, or not everybody's a kayaker either. So to me, the beautiful thing about this world is that everybody with different passions and different desires has the ability to chase their own dreams. And we do believe that the whole purpose of the park system is to try to make life better for as many people as possible. So therefore, when Andy came up with this different solution based upon the same data from the BAR report, this was very exciting to us. There is no way to give a golf course plan with all the unknowns that we had. I mean, we need to really understand the hydrology and the way the water flows and how to deal with the water before you can put together a plan of attack for a golf course. But I think the one simple thing that I would say is that the golf course that has been Hiawatha for all these years is, first of all, a very good golf course. I played there a bunch, played there as an amateur a lot, played some big tournaments there. And I've always found the course to be very challenging and a good golf course. And more importantly, tons of history. The golf course is just full of the history of not just the game of golf, but of people who have lived in the southern part of Minneapolis for a long, long time. Most people who don't know golf, probably would not be surprised to be aware that, for the longest time, professional golf was really for white people only. I mean, the idea of a person of color playing in a PGA Tour event was frowned upon. And as sad it is to say, it unfortunately was the truth, just as it was with baseball and other sports, so long ago. But there's a group of golfers from Hiawatha Golf Club in Minneapolis who really became tremendous golfers, who became professionals and were known to be fantastic teachers as well as great players of the game. And there are some of the gentlemen who really pushed the envelope and kind of helped create a situation where the PGA Tour became completely inclusive of people of all races. There's a man named Solomon Hughes, who the clubhouse is named after, who is probably one of the most recognized and well-known golfers from Hiawatha Golf Club. And so I think the game of golf has pushed boundaries tremendously in making, I think, our world a better place. And Hiawatha Golf Club, amazingly, has always been one of the most inclusive golf courses in the entire country. From the very first day that it was open until now, it's been a mixed bag of people of all races, creeds, colors, belief systems. Has never changed. So to me, the ability to maintain 18 holes of golf at Hiawatha is significant in so many ways, historically, culturally, as well as athletically. And I think the beautiful thing is that I think because of the work that the board has done to this point in creating, things to talk about, plans to present, which can be discussed, and those things are good because they present alternative plans and differing views. And I think more than anything, the goal of the golf, in this particular case at Hiawatha Golf Club, would be the most inclusive, multi-purpose golf course in the Twin Cities. We talked about, that there's a Hiawatha Park, and within Hiawatha Park is Hiawatha Golf Course with a fence around it. What if we remove the fences? And that kind of became a bit of a mantra. Let's take down the fences, and that's meaningful in so many ways. But to take down the fences mean let's make this open for everybody. Let's make this something that everybody can be happy with and can use. And so, our vision for the golf is not just golf. As an example, the driving range we envision as being turfed, like artificial turf, nice and flat, which can be used for youth sports, for camps, for charitable events. Something that's not just simply for golfers, but for the people who can really use the space, who need the space for flag football or some kind of a soccer camp for kids. And so they ultimately, you take down the fences and you make everybody welcome. So I think what I would really hope we would achieve through this whole process of taking an alternative plan of dealing with water would be to have an uncommon partnership between public and private, with the park board and people like us who really understand that our purposes are very much the same: to make life better for everybody, to allow people to enjoy their life the way they want to chase the passions that they think are so important. And to me, that also includes golf. So, without 18 holes of golf, if you only had 9 holes of golf or some kind of executive type arrangement with golf, it'd be like telling somebody to play baseball. I play 4 innings. You wouldn't do that. So this is a great solution. I'm really excited about it, and I'm excited about it because by getting back some of the land that we can recapture, it does create more space to create all those things that people of all passions might desire. So it could be quite a sensational park, and I think that as we go forward now with this differing proposal with water, we can put together a golf course plan that doesn't really change the course very much. It just makes it, improves it, and builds upon what's already there.
Anybody have any questions of Tom in the panel? Okay, well, if no one has.
Darwin.
Mr. Tom Oslund is next up. And Tom?
Yeah, Darwin, thanks.
More than welcome.
I'm Tom Oslund. I'm the founder and CEO of O2 Design and Urban Design and landscape architectural firm with offices in Minneapolis and in Chicago. I'm a University of Minnesota graduate, a Horace Cleveland Fellow. And if you don't know who Horace Cleveland is, Horace Cleveland was the conceptual landscape architect who laid out the entire park system. I'm also a graduate of Harvard's Graduate School of Design. And I'm a native of South Minneapolis, kid who grew up less than a mile from Hiawatha and spent, like many, countless hours learning how to play the game of golf, as rewarding and frustrating as that can be. Practicing, playing, and really most importantly, becoming part of that unique, diverse community that Hiawatha represents. I can't imagine talking about Hiawatha without talking about it as part of the entire system, the park system, the Minnehaha Basin watershed system, but also my interest really in Hiawatha is pretty simple. I think through collaborative design of the group that we have put together, I think we can develop an inspired master plan that has the potential and to recognize, preserve, and clearly celebrate the cultural history of this significant open space for the African American community in South Minneapolis at a time when we need it most. And I think that's the thing that has motivated me to be part of this team, is that this is a significant cultural and social design problem. It can become an amazing model for just thoughtful, design for the community, representing and celebrating its history and culture, and developing a new sustainable model for our open space design. And I would really love to be a part of that. As what little I can bring, I would love to be a part of it. And in a way, I think it represents something that, significantly, it's the last park before it, significant park space that before it hits the Mississippi River. And it shouldn't be treated as last. It should be treated as equally as all the spaces that surround the city. So I'm coming at it from a total systems point of view, looking at all these various elements from water, from design, from master planning, from cultural history, and how we move forward with a really inspired plan. And in a way, for me, it's paying it forward for what Hiawatha gave to me as a resident of South Minneapolis. And Tom Lehman and I have a history of working together. I love the discussions that we've had with eliminating the fence as a metaphor, having it a very accessible, very open kind of open space. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Charles. Charles is a colleague of mine. Charles and I have worked together. Charles is the CEO of the Cultural Landscape Foundation in Washington, D.C., and will bring to light how we can work collaboratively and shape a new plan, perhaps that addresses all these criteria for Hiawatha. So, Charles.
Oh, good evening, all. Greetings. It's an hour later on the East Coast here. I'm not born and raised in the Twin Cities, but I have had the good fortune of probably visiting for the last almost 30 years, every couple of years. I was in the Twin Cities most recently last fall for an event we organized with a whole bunch of folks called What's Out There Weekend. And What's Out There Weekend, like all of our work at the Cultural Landscape Foundation, is about making visible, instilling value, and engaging the public in our shared landscape heritage. It's also what tonight is about. It's why we're all here. 2 years before that, in October of 2019, when I was in town, and this is a shout out to Mayor Frey, we awarded him the Foundation's Stewardship Excellence Award for the city's leadership on PV Plaza. And I'm going to read the statement that I read that night in the sort of event room at Orchestra Hall. It's very short. PV, happily, was not an either-or scenario. What we see today illustrates that the design and historic preservation community can and do work hand in glove, and that the leadership of thoughtful landscape architects can solve complex problems and create spaces that generations from now will tell the story of who we are, where we've come from, and where we're going. Like Tom, I was schooled in the school of HWS Cleveland and those that shaped the Twin Cities. More recently, I learned about the less obscure now, Mr. Nussbaumer, who was doing the work in St. Paul, complementing the work that Cleveland was doing in Minneapolis. But on this most recent visit, what was so illuminating to me was to see how the city had embraced a much larger narrative that recognized the native peoples that came before those associated with European contact. And I got to visit Rondo, which I will confess I had never heard anything about before just a couple of years ago. And I went to that landscape on the same day that I visited the site where George Floyd was murdered. And what I realized that the power of both of these places, in the case of Floyd, aside from the nearness of the event, was the ephemerality of the gestures of what the community has done and continues to do every day. There is a power of place there that I would say it was one of the most powerful landscape experiences I've had in quite some time. And when I visited Rondo, which is a commemorative landscape in the same way that the site of George Floyd's murder is a commemorative landscape, I experienced landscapes that have been newly created by communities. And one of the things that we have come to understand when we're looking at landscapes associated with the African-American experience, and I know that many people here know much more about the redlining that took place in the Twin Cities historically than I do, but I know enough to know that there has been tremendous erasure. And with that erasure comes a spatial nostalgia, a yearning to go home because so many of these places have been significantly altered over time, many times very purposefully. And in the case of Hiawatha, as Tom Lehman alluded to earlier, there is a long and deep history of mixed races commingling, of it being the first the first course to have mixed races in the upper Midwest in 1939, the integration of the golf club in 1952. There is a powerful story of harmony to be told in these 18 holes and in the power of place that is the course and its associated landscape. And so it is, first, I'm honored to be here tonight to be talking with my esteemed colleagues. I also want to say hats off to Andy. It was the first time I got to see his presentation, and I'm looking forward to having more conversations with you, sir. But to me, as I said earlier, when it's gone, it's gone. And I think there are, the question that I asked the team that I'm all here with today, and I ask all of you that are joining us to ask yourself the same question. What other public landscape in the Twin Cities can tell the story of harmony in the way that Hiawatha can? This is undoubtedly a landscape that is significant in the story of the city and the story of our nation. The Cultural Landscape Foundation gets involved in landscapes that are elevated to national significance. Our involvement with PV Plaza was because it was the work of a master, and it was the progenitor of a landscape typology, in this case, a hybrid, a park plaza. We believe that Hiawatha is that sort of large mother nesting doll in a series of mother nesting dolls that has a story that is inspiring and powerful, that should be an integrated part of managing the course for the future. In closing, I just want to say it's not often that the person that is bringing history to the table goes last. We usually go first. And I have to say it was really an honor to follow everyone. And it was great to think about history as forward thinking. And my hope is that in the way that Andy has taken us into such a level of detail to understand the water and the ecology of the place, that we will be afforded the same depth of information to understand the evolution of this landscape over time, those areas that are the most significant, and those areas that are the least significant. So when we're managing change here to deal with the tremendous issue of flooding, we can do so while honoring the bone structure, the integrity of what is, I think, unquestionably a National Register eligible landscape associated with the African American and by extension, the American story. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles. Does anyone have any questions for anyone on the panel at this point in time? That being, any questions for Andy? Any questions for Tom Lehman, Tom Oslund, or Mr. Charles Birnbaum? I am so sorry, Charles. But anyway.
Darwin, you can just call me Mr. Charles.
I think I would do that going forward. I really want to thank you, gentlemen, for being here, because this is a night of clarity and of information that is necessary for this project to move forward in an orderly manner. And also, it's an illustration that if we put our heads together to resolve a problem, we can come up with the proper solution. And that's all we're asking for the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, is to have a private-public partnership with us so that we can move this project forward in an orderly manner and get our ideas on the table. And not only that, our national significance of Hiawatha on the table as well, and not bury that in the background. And so at this point, we would like to bring the stream to an end tonight, but this isn't the end of our conversation. We will meet with the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board on April 6th. We'll have our 15 minutes with them. If any of you gentlemen are interested in speaking that night, they've allotted us 3 minutes apiece until our 15 minutes is up. Thus this video tonight, so that we could have our time to actually get our points and our idea across. We'll be posting this live stream so that others can learn about our particular proposal, plan of the future. But there's a lot of things that will impact that proposal and plan that still needs to be accomplished. And as soon as the park board has completed Section 106, and we have that data, then we can move forward with finalizing our master plan, which we feel is a much better plan to maintain 18 holes of golf at Hiawatha Golf Course. I'd like to thank you, gentlemen, for being here this evening. And if no one has any questions, we'll bring this conversation to a close for now. Thank you, Tom Lehman, Tom Oslund, Charles, and Mr. Komor. We appreciate you guys being there. Jeff, thank you for pulling this together and managing the whole process for us. And Jim, we'll be talking soon.
Sounds great. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Darwin.
Thank you.